Mark 4 and 5. So why parables? Again, I think when we hear Jesus say things that aren't expected, it's good to pay attention. Regarding the sower parable, he says this. Jesus says, they asked Jesus about the parable. He said to them, to you it has been given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God. So let's say it this way. Jesus does want to give information to one group of people, but then he ends this phrase this way, but to those who are on the outside. Remember, Jesus has come to clarify. One of the roles of Jesus is to clarify who's on the outside, and of course the opposite would be the inside. But as he finishes this, to those who are on the outside, all things come in parables. In other words, the information that Jesus is trying to give about God to two groups of people, the reason he gives a parable in this statement in Mark 4 is because he wants those on the outside to not understand. They're going to listen to a parable and say, I don't know, probably about me or probably about our Pharisees or something like that, and they walk away, and it probably buys Jesus more time, things like that. Jesus will die at a certain point in his ministry. I think it's because he starts to be more clear about what he's saying. And so early on, it's, again, kind of interesting to hear him say it this bluntly, that there are those on the outside who he is purposely trying to confuse. And that seems to be the point of the parable. So, and this is how the parable of the sower concludes, remember, when Jesus pulls aside his disciples and he explains the meaning to the sower, or the sower sows the word and things like that, and he goes through the details. So those who are on the inside always have the opportunity, as it were, to pull Jesus aside and say, explain to us the meaning of that story. And some stories are, one or two verses, others are quite long. And so that seems to be the purpose of parables, to confuse one group of people and clarify information for another group. Now the question obviously is, how does this happen? How do we get outsiders versus insiders? I'd recommend it's the same story. Those who are saying no to Yahweh and thus yes to created spirits are creating their own situation. Jesus doesn't come to two groups saying, I want you both to understand, and you are going to understand because you're smart or intelligent or figure out the meaning of my words. The reason that one group of people says, I don't understand, is because they have already said to God, I don't want you, I want someone else. Those who are loyal, again in our story, seem to be those who will say, wow, it's interesting, Jesus, can you clarify? And he will. So it's really the which Elohim question already, or kind of a here we go again story that Jesus is clarifying for the world that he has come into. Which Elohim do you worship? That will be the operative question for whether you understand a parable or you do not. This is the ears to hear idea. Take heed what you hear. With the same measure you use, it will be measured to you, and to you who hear, more will be given. For whoever has, to him will be given, more will be given, but whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. It sounds unfair, but Jesus is saying there's a bigger question in the story here. Which God do you worship now causes this question here. And I like to think of it this way for those who are Christians. If you want a relationship with Yahweh, be ready for not just information, but quite a bit of information. A lifetime, I like to think of it as a lifetime of increasing learning. The opposite is just as true, although I'm not living that life, so I don't know how it feels necessarily. For those who are not believers that I have befriended, I have one picture in my mind of driving with someone for a couple of hours down to Rochester from the Twin Cities, and the whole time was spent on both trips with him asking, why this, why that? And I could just sense it wasn't as though he was antagonistic. It was honest questions of things that don't make sense. And my statement to him was, over those 4 hours, it's not the questions that are bothering you, it's this that's really the issue. You have to say, and this frustrated him, but to me this is the story of, again, Jesus. You have to say yes to Yahweh in order for Jesus to make sense. If you say no, Jesus will not make sense. You'll spend a lifetime not just of frustration, but a lifetime of questions that you think aren't being answered. And meanwhile, the whole time, Jesus has been saying, it's not the information that's causing the trouble, it's the willingness to say yes to Yahweh. Well, we have this quick story of a woman, and we'll talk about this now next time because it's going to be worth our time to talk about. A woman in our story wants to touch Jesus in order to be healed. Now, that seems to be a pagan concept that has been part of their world, that people think that if I touch the garment of a healer, I can have some kind of power give me healing. I think Jesus simply accommodated that at that point, and the woman touches him, he calls her out, and then apparently because she's one of these, because he, remember what Jesus says, your faith, there's that word loyalty again, your faith has made you well. So this is not simply a matter of someone touching Jesus and miraculously, getting an electrical shock and thus being made or thus being healed. It's someone who has faith in Yahweh. I believe she came to Jesus wanting healing, but really in her heart she's a loyalist. And Jesus rewards her in this moment of saying, it's your loyalty, it's not your touching my garment that has made you well. Now we'll talk about this next time. But what needs to be clarified, I think, in our stories, we have seven examples in the Gospels, 7 statements where Jesus says, your faith has made you well. The word well and the word saved are the same word in Greek. This word sozo, often translated as well, can mean physical healing or physical salvation for a momentary issue. So here we will talk about again next time 7 times where Jesus tells someone, and some of them are parallel stories, but your faith has made you well or saved. What I want to distinguish this idea from is the idea of sins being forgiven, because we'll have a story in our Matthew reading next time where Jesus will tell a boy, a paralytic, we've seen this already in Mark, where he tells a person that their sins are forgiven. Here we have a story of a woman whose faith has made her well. What I'd like to argue through next time or talk through is that all 4 of these words are very difficult to bring into English based upon their Greek meaning and their Old Testament meaning. But difficult in the sense that we have to think Old Testament thoughts to make a difference between these 2 lines of thinking. These 2, to me, are very different. One has to do with how God responds to loyalty. The other does not work that way. This is a ritual forgiveness of something that has made you unclean, which is a different topic. Well, let's save that tomorrow for our Matthew reading.